Canada is facing a major political shakeup as Alberta and Saskatchewan have just taken steps toward independence from the rest of the country. Both provinces recently passed sovereignty acts that give them more power to reject federal laws they believe harm their interests, sending shock through Ottawa and raising serious questions about the future of Canadian unity. This bold move has many wondering if we're witnessing the beginning of a potential separation from Canada altogether. What exactly are these sovereignty acts? And could this actually lead to the breakup of Canada as we know it? Let's break down what's happening, why it matters, and what could come next. Historical context of separatism. Alberta and Saskatchewan's push for more independence isn't something that just happened overnight. These feelings have deep roots going back many decades in Western Canada. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, many Western farmers felt abandoned by the federal government. While they struggled with drought and poverty, they believed Ottawa wasn't doing enough to help them. This planted early seeds of Western alienation, the feeling that the Western provinces weren't being treated fairly. The real spark for separatist thinking came in the 1970s when Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau introduced the National Energy Program. This policy controlled oil prices and put extra taxes on Alberta's oil industry. Many Albertans were furious, feeling the federal government was stealing their resources and wealth. During this time, bumper stickers reading, "Let the Eastern bastards freeze in the dark," became popular, showing how angry people felt. In 1980, a group called Western Canada Concept formed, becoming the first serious separatist party in Alberta. They even managed to win a seat in Alberta's legislature in 1982, though their popularity didn't last long. The 1990s brought new frustrations. Many Westerners felt that Quebec was getting special treatment from the federal government while Western concerns were being ignored. This led to the creation of the Reform Party, which wasn't separatist but focused on giving Western Canada a stronger voice in national politics. In 2001, the Firewall Letter marked another important moment. Future Prime Minister Stephen Harper, along with other conservative thinkers, wrote to Alberta's premier suggesting the province build a firewall to protect itself from federal policies. They recommended Alberta create its own pension plan, police force, and tax collection system, ideas that sound very similar to what we're hearing today. The 2010s saw oil prices crash, bringing economic hardship to Alberta and Saskatchewan. Many blamed federal environmental policies and pipeline delays for making things worse. This led to the birth of new separatist groups like Wexit, Western Exit in 2018, inspired by Brexit in the United Kingdom. By 2019, polls showed that about 1 in 4 people in Alberta and Saskatchewan had some support for the idea of separation. While most didn't want to actually leave Canada, these numbers revealed deep frustration with the federal government. Throughout this history, certain complaints have remained consistent. Western separatists often point to the equalization payment system, where wealthier provinces help fund services in less wealthy ones, as unfair to Alberta. They argue their resources are being used to support other provinces while their own needs are ignored. They also frequently mention how the Senate and House of Commons give more power to Ontario and Quebec because of their larger populations, leaving Western concerns underrepresented in national decision-making. Understanding this history helps explain why today's independence movements aren't just a passing trend, but part of a long-standing tension between Western Canada and the federal government. While full separation has never gained majority support, the desire for more autonomy and respect has been a constant theme in Alberta and Saskatchewan politics for generations. Now, those echoes are growing louder. Recent political developments. The provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan have recently taken some bold steps that have Ottawa politicians worried. These Western provinces are pushing for more control over their own affairs, and some people are even calling it a move toward independence from Canada. Last month, Alberta's government introduced a new law called the Alberta Sovereignty Act. This law gives Alberta the power to ignore certain federal laws if they believe those laws hurt Alberta's interests or step on provincial rights. Premier Danielle Smith said this act will protect Albertans from Ottawa's overreach and allow the province to chart its own course on important issues like energy development and environmental regulations. At the same time, Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe announced plans for what he calls provincial autonomy measures. His government is working on creating its own provincial tax collection agency, which would take over collecting taxes from the federal government. Saskatchewan is also looking to form its own provincial police force instead of relying on the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Both provinces have started talking about holding public votes, called referendums, to ask their citizens how they feel about having more independence. These wouldn't be votes to completely separate from Canada right away, but rather to see if people support pushing for more provincial powers. The provinces are especially upset about federal climate policies. Alberta's government recently said it won't implement the federal clean fuel standard, which aims to reduce carbon emissions. Saskatchewan has joined Alberta in challenging the federal carbon tax in court, arguing that provinces should control their own natural resources. Energy is a big part of this push for more independence. Both provinces have large oil and gas industries, and they feel Ottawa's environmental policies are hurting their economies. Premier Smith recently said, "We will not allow our energy workers to lose their jobs because of policies made by politicians who don't understand our industry." Another interesting development is that both provinces are exploring the idea of creating their own pension plans, separate from the Canada Pension Plan. This would give them control over billions of dollars currently managed by the federal government. The provinces have also started working more closely together. They recently signed a Western Economic Cooperation Agreement to coordinate their policies on trade, energy, and agriculture without waiting for federal approval. Some politicians in these provinces have even started using the term nation within a nation to describe how they see their future relationship with Canada. They point to how Quebec has special status and powers within Canada, and they want similar treatment. These moves have created tension between the provincial and federal governments. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called for unity while expressing concern about these developments. Meanwhile, business leaders in both provinces are divided. Some worry about economic uncertainty, while others support having more local control. As these provinces continue pushing for more independence, many Canadians are wondering how far they'll go and how Ottawa will respond to this growing challenge. Reactions from Ottawa and other provinces. When Alberta and Saskatchewan announced their plans to gain more independence, the Canadian government in Ottawa didn't stay quiet. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called an emergency meeting with his cabinet. They spent hours discussing what to do about these western provinces wanting more control. The Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs reached out directly to the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan. She suggested creating a special committee where both sides could talk about their problems and find solutions that work for everyone. Ottawa quickly put together a team of experts to look at what would happen if these provinces got the independence they wanted. They worried about how this might affect Canada's economy, especially since Alberta has so much oil and gas. They also wondered what would happen to people living in these provinces. Would they still get the same healthcare and other benefits that all Canadians share? Not all provinces reacted the same way. British Columbia, Alberta's neighbor to the west, expressed serious concerns. Their premier worried that changes in Alberta might hurt trade between the provinces and create problems for people who live near the provincial border. Ontario, Canada's most populated province, took a more middle ground approach. Their premier said they understood why western provinces felt ignored sometimes, but urged everyone to find solutions within Canada's existing system. Quebec watched the situation with particular interest. Having held independence referendums in the past, many Quebec politicians understood the feelings driving Alberta and Saskatchewan. Some nationalist leaders in Quebec even suggested that this might be a good time for them to revisit their own independence questions. The Atlantic provinces, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador generally opposed the Western independence movement. Their premiers released a joint statement saying that as smaller provinces, they believed in the importance of a united Canada. Manitoba, sitting between Ontario and Saskatchewan, found itself in an awkward position. Its premier tried to play peacemaker, suggesting that both Ottawa and the western provinces needed to compromise. The territories, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, expressed concerns about how Western independence might affect their own relationships with the federal government. They worried that if provinces could pick and choose which federal powers they accepted, it might change how the territories were treated too. Behind closed doors, federal officials developed several plans. One focused on offering economic incentives to keep the western provinces happy. Another looked at possible constitutional changes that might give provinces more say in certain areas while keeping Canada united. As weeks passed, the tone from Ottawa shifted from surprise and concern to a more strategic approach focused on negotiation and finding common ground. But how much support do these independence movements really have? Public opinion and support. Recent surveys show that the idea of Alberta and Saskatchewan becoming independent has gained more attention in the last few years. Let's look at what people in these provinces actually think about breaking away from Canada. According to a 2023 Angus Reid poll, about 20% of Albertans strongly support the idea of independence, while another 19% somewhat support it. That means nearly 4 out of 10 Albertans have some level of interest in separating from Canada. In Saskatchewan, the numbers are slightly lower, with 16% strongly supporting independence and 17% somewhat supporting it. These feelings aren't spread evenly across all groups. The surveys show that men are more likely than women to support independence. About 45% of men in Alberta favor separation compared to 33% of women. Age also plays a role. People between 35 and 54 show the strongest support, while those under 25 and over 65 are less interested in breaking away. Where people live matters too. Rural areas in both provinces show much stronger support for independence than big cities like Edmonton, Calgary, or Saskatoon. In rural Alberta, support reaches nearly 50% in some regions, especially those heavily connected to the oil and gas industry. Education and income also affect how people feel. Those with college diplomas or trade certificates tend to support independence more than university graduates. People working in natural resources, construction, and transportation industries show the highest support rates, often reaching above 45%. When asked why they support independence, most people mention 3 main reasons. Feeling that Ottawa doesn't respect Western interests, 76%. Believing their province contributes more to Canada than it gets back, 68%. And frustration with federal policies on energy and environment, 65%. However, even among supporters, there are concerns. When asked about practical challenges of independence, many worry about economic uncertainty, 62%. Potential trade problems, 58%. And questions about currency and borders, 51%. It's worth noting that support for independence tends to rise and fall based on current events. For example, after the 2019 federal election, support for separation in Alberta jumped to 33% but later dropped to 25% before rising again during disputes over pipeline projects. Political party preference is also strongly connected to independence views. In Alberta, about 52% of conservative voters show some support for separation, compared to only 11% of liberal voters and 9% of NDP voters. Interestingly, when given options beyond just stay or leave, many people prefer a middle ground. When offered choices like more provincial powers while staying in Canada or special status within Confederation, support for these compromise options reaches 58% in Alberta and 54% in Saskatchewan. These numbers tell us that while complete independence doesn't have majority support, there is significant frustration in both provinces about their place in Canada. Many Western Canadians feel their concerns aren't being heard, even if they're not ready to fully separate. If Alberta and Saskatchewan actually moved toward independence, it would change Canada in ways that would affect everyone. Let's look at what might happen if these provinces seriously pursued breaking away from the rest of the country. Potential implications for Canada. The economic impact would be huge. Alberta and Saskatchewan together make up about 25% of Canada's GDP, with Alberta alone producing most of Canada's oil. If these provinces left, Canada would lose a major chunk of its energy resources overnight. The federal government would miss out on billions in tax dollars that help pay for things like healthcare and education across the country. For the rest of Canada, gas prices would likely go up since much of eastern Canada relies on Western oil. Companies with operations across provincial borders would face new challenges, possibly leading to job losses and higher prices for everyday items. For Alberta and Saskatchewan themselves, independence would bring both opportunities and risks. They could keep more of their resource money and make their own rules about development, but they'd also face serious questions. Would they need to create their own currency? How would trade work with the rest of Canada and the United States? What about pensions and healthcare systems that are currently linked to federal programs? The political landscape would change dramatically too. Without Alberta and Saskatchewan's 62 seats in Parliament, the Conservative Party would lose a significant portion of its base. This could shift the balance of power in federal politics, giving more influence to Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Socially, there would be difficult questions for people living in these provinces. What would happen to Indigenous communities whose treaties are with the Canadian government? Would people need passports to visit family in other parts of what used to be the same country? Universities, sports teams, and cultural organizations that operate nationally would need to adjust to new borders. There's also the practical matter of geography. If Alberta and Saskatchewan left Canada, they would be landlocked countries surrounded by Canada and the US. They would need to negotiate agreements just to move their products to ports for international shipping. Some experts suggest that rather than full independence, these provinces might end up with a special status arrangement, staying in Canada but with more control over their resources and taxes. This has happened in other countries where regions have pushed for more autonomy without completely separating. The rest of Canada wouldn't stay the same either. Other provinces might demand similar powers if Alberta and Saskatchewan got special treatment. This could lead to a very different kind of federation where provinces have varying relationships with Ottawa. Whatever happens, most experts agree that the process would be complicated and take years to work out. During that time, uncertainty could hurt investment in both the separating provinces and the rest of Canada. For students growing up in this changing Canada, these decisions would shape what kind of country you inherit, its size, its wealth, and how its different regions work together or apart.